Hey guys, we like to joke about DC Comics frantically trying to catch up to Marvel with their own shoddily thrown together cinematic universe, but this is not the first time they tried to capitalize on a major craze. Back in 2008, they were trying to capitalize on Twilight, of all things. I mean, granted, Superman and Batman vs. Vampires and Werewolves doesn't involve one of the heroes getting tied up in a love triangle with these supernatural beings, but a story about vampires and werewolves released the same year that the first Twilight movie came out? Someone at DC was smelling dollar signs, methinks. But then again, if these covers are any indication, it's good to know that we're going to be dealing with monsters in these comics instead of mopey teenagers who lead alternative lifestyles. Our 6-issue miniseries opens up on a half-eaten corpse in some Gotham City alleyway. Standing over it is a Marius Demeter, whom is quickly set upon by the Dark Knight himself. "I didn't do this." "I know. I was following the thing that did." "But then I saw you and decided I'd come by and say hello. I mean, hey, it's just a big scary monster. I'm sure I can track it down just by saying I'm Batman or something." Demeter disappears into the wall before Batman can question him any further. "For once, the Dark Knight detective is actually taken by surprise. It's usually he who disappears into the shadows." He then issued a lawsuit against Demeter for stealing his gimmick. They then jump to a parking lot where a woman is being jumped by... well, the comic says it's a vampire, but it looks more like an aging baboon to me. If you'd asked Sandy if she believed in vampires a few hours ago, she'd have told you that they were right up there with the Tooth Fairy. She then realized that she lives in a world where superintelligent space squirrels can make light constructs out of their emotions. At most, this would be slightly startling. The vampire takes a bite out of her, but then Wonder Woman makes the see, "Oh my god, what is going on with her spine?" Her torso is twisted 90 degrees like she was an action figure. I know that she was originally born from clay, but I don't think she's supposed to be that flexible. But she's too late. The vampire has killed its victim. Wendy makes quick work of it and wraps it up with a lasso of truth, showing her a flash of the person it used to be. This can't be. This vampire used to be Kevin Bacon. I have a Bacon number of 1! Meanwhile, deep in the bowels of the Batcave underneath Stately Wayne Manor, Batman studies the first body and determines that it was partially eaten and then thrown up, possibly to serve as some kind of a message. He also detects a culture of mutagenic cells that are rapidly increasing in number. Great. First we have werewolves and vampires, now we have John Carpenter's The Thing to contend with. Later in Gotham Park, we see Demeter being jumped by something that looks like it's made of pubes. "You? How dare you! How dare you replace my dialogue with gardening tools!" This hulking werewolf thing attacks Demeter for bringing Batman in on this. No, he didn't. But Demeter assures him that Batman's involvement can be a good thing, since he can help them find some professor that they're looking for. The werewolf runs off, probably off to chase a squirrel or something. Then we cut to Batman following a particularly bloody trail that the first monster left in its wake. He follows the trail into an apartment, and waits for its tenant to come home. "Forgive me for not knocking. Did you know that the Bat-God has a wonderful plan for your life?" He has a little talk with Dr. Herbert Combs, who apparently has been studying Eastern European belief systems. They leave on friendly terms, but Batman knows something isn't right with this guy. He doesn't need a polygraph to know that Combs is lying, or a microscope to prove that the fiber on Combs' jacket will match the ones he found on the body, but he'll test them just the same. Ugh, I hate being the world's greatest detective. Just once I would like to do something off of a blind hunch or something. Nice use of the giant spiderweb in this panel. It's almost like Batman was walking into a trap or something. Subtle. Once Batman is out of his hair, Combs goes down into the basement, which has been retrofitted into a high-tech science lab. The code is meticulously tapped out. 333, which, when multiplied together, is, of course, 27. The mathematical humor is delicious. Okay, I got one for you. This is gonna be great. What happens when you multiply 3 by 3, and then you multiply that by 3 again? 27! Do you get it? 27! 27? And the issue ends on a splash page of a bunch of victims who are either turning into vampires or gorillas. It's kind of hard to tell. On to issue number 2, which apparently features a tentacled creature from beyond. Oh goody, I always wanted to see Batman in tentacle hentai. We open on Nightwing chasing another monster with no explanation of what he's doing here in Gotham instead of his hometown, Bloodhaven. The thing he's pursuing is no normal man. Not that anyone would use that term to describe Nightwing either. But that's what he is. A normal, healthy young man at the peak of physical conditioning and training. He's perfectly normal, but he would just prefer that nobody calls him that, or else he won't feel like a special little snowflake anymore. It's revealed that the monster he's chasing is a werewolf, and he seems perfectly nonchalant about it. How jaded do you have to be when not even this is enough to faze you? After they fight for a bit, Nightwing declares that, "This is going to hurt you a lot more than it is me." And what does he do to bring this foul beast down? I have no idea. The comic cuts to elsewhere, since establishing finite locations is for chumps, as Batman is apprehending another vampire who is attempting to eat a small boy. "I can't let you have him." "I said no! Not until you finish your piece first!" The Dark Knight detective is a man of few words. No snappy comebacks, no jokes about him and the vampire going out for a steak, but somehow, his actions truly do speak louder than words. He makes short work of the vampire. Sure's a good thing this ordinary mortal with no superpowers is somehow faster than a vampire. Then he takes him home to his kinky sex laboratory. Naturally, this particular room puts Batman in a very particular frame of mind, which is why he instinctively calls Nightwing Robin. Gross. Nightwing brings in the werewolf that he had defeated completely off-panel. Apparently, werewolves and vampires possess the super strength of the common street thug. Should it be Superman to help bring in these supernatural creatures? As much as I don't like believing it, the facts seem to point to this guy being the real deal. Dude, you've been fighting vampires since the 70s. This shouldn't be that much of a shock to you. The werewolf reverts back to its human state, and tells him that he and a bunch of other people were abducted by Dr. Combs. Nightwing leaves to do whatever brought him into Gotham in the first place. Shouldn't the looming threat of vampires and werewolves take priority? Leaving Batman to handle Combs on his own. He heads back to Combs' lab to investigate, but when he finds Combs in the lab, some kind of gelatinous monster bursts out of his mouth.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Then Demeter shows up from out of nowhere, casts some kind of a spell that sounds like Latin, even though a Google search reveals that it's mostly nonsense, and this allows Batman to defeat the monster with a single punch. I had no real power over the thing, but the threat was enough, since it was a newborn. I basically shook its confidence. I threatened to take away its iPad, and it quickly fell into line. Batman chases Combs to the top of the building, where we finally see Superman come into the story, which happens to be the last page of this issue. And what is it that finally brought him out? Another monster that's actually bigger than the building it's sitting on top of. That building should be collapsing under that thing's weight. Issue 3 begins with Superman flying head-on into the monster. Stay back! Superman, no! You don't understand! It's...
Monty Python, the Flying Circus!
Superman, no! You don't understand! It's... magic! Oh, it's magic! You know... Just by its nature of being magical, the monster is able to take down Superman with a single thwack of its tentacle. Seeing as how Superman is supposed to be vulnerable to magic attacks, not just the existence of magic itself, I can only assume that this was a magical thwack of its tentacle, otherwise Sup should have been able to handle it no problem. Superman proceeds to throw a piece of the building at the monster, but he then takes a break to get a couple of hobos out of harm's way. He also recommends a nearby shelter to them before resuming his business, making him sound like a yelper. A shelter yelper. Batman ignores the monster to ask Demeter why he knows as much about it as he does. Then he explains that Combs was trying to open a door to the Netherworld after reading some Lovecraft. You gotta love how apparently that's all you need to make a door to the fricking Netherworld. This is like me making a space drive out of improbability just because I've read a little bit of Douglas Adams. Superman interrupts the conversation to tell them the monster got away. How the hell did you let it get away? You knocked the crap out of it! Excuse me, but just who are you? Sorry, Soups, but that monster looked like it was about 10 stories high. I think he's allowed to ask how it got away. Me? They call me Demeter. I'm magic. Wanna play? Is he magic? The Batman vs. Dracula told us that vampirism is just an infection of the bloodstream which can be easily cured with a vaccine. Demeter backs down after Superman threatens to throw him into the sun. Isn't that pleasant? Then he goes off to look for the monster. As if the trail going cold wasn't bad enough, his search gets put on hold to fight off another vampire. Then that werewolf from before attacks Superman and tells him to stay out of it. After getting in a good swipe on Superman's bulletproof face, since werewolf claws are apparently that strong, Superman follows up with a punch that looks like it should reduce the werewolf's face into goop, but it turns out it barely did anything at all. The werewolf tries to explain that there's still some time for him to fix this little mess so long as Soups and Batman back off, but the conversation is interrupted when Superman hears the boy he saved from the vampire earlier get attacked by Combs. Sheesh, millions of people in Gotham City and Combs has to have the kid who was just under Superman's watchful eye? The guy's got balls, gotta give him that. But Superman's too late. The boy is gone, and I guess Superman can't use his X-ray vision or super hearing to track Combs down. Because if Superman is going to share panel time with Batman, he has to completely forget that he can do any of those things because he needs to be on an even keel with him or something. Batman and Demeter, meanwhile, start hunting for random werewolves in Gotham Park, because there's only one park in all of Gotham City. Then more vampires show up. Demeter can't help Batman because he's too busy eating one of the fallen werewolves. And I guess we're not supposed to be horrified by the supernatural implications of a werewolf that's being bitten by a vampire? And then he goes off to find Combs, leaving Batman to deal with the vampires all by himself. But because this is a Batman-Superman story, time to shoehorn in some other Justice League characters without any kind of foreshadowing whatsoever. Here's Green Arrow and Jason Blood, aka Etrigan the Demon, for no reason. Hooray! Come on, boys, play nice. I've brought enough wooden-tipped arrows for all of you. Shouldn't it be silver-tipped arrows? I mean, we do often see vampires being stopped by wooden stakes through the heart, but I don't think wood was ever one of their weaknesses. Or is Green Lantern Alan Scott actually a vampire? Before we begin with issue 4, I gotta laugh at its cover for a second. Most comic artists will tell you that the legs being spread apart like that for an action scene will make it look a bit more dynamic, but with the way Batman and Superman are leaning back, they look like a couple of action figures about to topple over backwards. Anyway, we open on Superman flying through a hospital which is littered with corpses of the recently slaughtered orderlies. I get that Soups would probably have incredible focus so that he isn't overwhelmed by his super senses, but I would also think that he'd have heard some of the blood-curdling screams that came from these people just as they were being eaten alive. He's fast enough to give the Flash a run for his money, but he couldn't get there in time to save anyone? He finds that kid that he saved from issue 3 stealing a couple of bags of plasma, and he deduces that in spite of his vampirism, the boy doesn't want to hurt anybody. So a veteran vampire like Demeter is easily distracted by a little bit of spilt blood, but the newbie has total control over himself to the point where he can find an alternative to eating people? Superman is then ambushed by even more werewolves and vampires with Batman, Arrow, and Etrigan in pursuit. I love how Batman is able to fend for himself just by punching these werewolves in the face. He could be using some kind of sonic disruptors to mess with their enhanced hearing, but no, beating them with brute force is perfectly acceptable for someone of Batman's intellectual stature. Superman tries to protect the boy, but Batman won't have it. He's a vampire! All of my research has shown the condition is irreversible! It's not what you found out in the Batman vs. Dracula. And what research did you conduct to reach that conclusion? All you had was a dead body with some kind of weird bacteria in its blood. You see nothing to suggest that vampirism can't be cured. Superman still thinks that the boy has a chance, and he flies off with him before Batman and Arrow can kill him. After the swarm of vampires and werewolves are dealt with, Demeter shows up again with a werewolf colleague in tow. Where he's been all this time and why he hasn't been trying to help Demeter with this little outbreak is, of course, never explained. Demeter gives a backstory about how he and Janko here met Combs in St. Petersburg, working as protection for the local mob. They helped him get access to a local cemetery, where he somehow manages to pull a werewolf and vampire out of the netherworld. Through some vague, unexplained mad scientist mumbo-jumbo, Combs used these creatures to turn Demeter and Janko into a werewolf, and they've been hunting him down to reverse the process ever since. But it's been a while since we've had a horde of monsters attacking our heroes, so we suddenly have a horde of monsters attacking our heroes. Green Arrow is afraid he may not have enough arrows, so it's time for Jason to bust out the big guns, and he turns into Etrigan the demon. Any reason why he didn't open with that move? Seems to me that would have made the fight scenes end a lot faster. Whoa! Okay, maybe he shouldn't use the demon as his opening move since decapitation and head explodey. Demeter just said that Combs may have a way to reverse what's been done to him and his friend, which means that these other people who are similarly afflicted are not beyond hope. Stop killing the victims already! For some reason, Combs is within pouncing range of this fight, and Demeter jumps him. I saw this man use his own body as a doorway to the land of the undead. A hellish creature crawled out of his mouth. In short, I don't trust him. Hey, what do you know? Batman doesn't trust somebody. Are you surprised? I'm surprised. Etrigan then closes the door by... sticking his nose in Combs' mouth? Do you two need a moment alone? Green Arrow proceeds to take Combs in, when Batman says, Arkham Asylum's nearly full again. So apparently the justice system in Gotham is so beyond repair that Batman could just toss anybody into Arkham Asylum without them being declared legally insane, or even tried for their crimes. Combs gets away from Arrow and rushes Batman, disgusted by Batman's disgust over this whole affair. If you'd ever had anyone you'd ever loved ripped away from you, you know why I have to find the answers. Oh, that's why you despise my research. You're afraid of what's on the other side, aren't you? The ramblings of a psychotic brain, or iceberg tips of truth from a sensitive mind? The ramblings of a psychotic brain. Apparently this is all happening because this guy lost someone who was close to them, and he figures the only way to bring them back is to infect random mobsters with vampirism and lycanthropy? This guy is nuttier than squirrel poo. And then Etrigan murders Combs with his fire breath, while Batman just stands there and lets it happen. How very heroic. Superman, meanwhile, escorts that little vampire boy to the only person in the world who has a chance of curing his vampirism, Dr. Kurt Langstrom, aka the Man-Bat, even though he has yet to cure himself of his werebat affliction, so why does Superman think he can help? Before Langstrom can attempt anything, Superman sees more werewolves approaching. Even if we knew why these werewolves were so adamant about getting Superman or this little kid, how exactly would they have tracked him down to this laboratory which is on the top floor of a skyscraper? Are we supposed to assume that their senses of smell and hearing are just that good? Langstrom gives himself an injection to turn into the Man-Bat so he can deal with the werewolves, and while he's kicking ass and taking names, the narration reiterates the point that because these werewolves are magical in origin, that means that Superman is more vulnerable to them than you might think. I still call bullcrap on that. If magic is going to be an issue for Superman, it's only when someone uses magic-based attacks on him. Superman isn't weakened just by the mere presence of magic. That's why he can stand to be within arm's reach of Zatanna, Captain Marvel, or Wonder Woman without his powers diminishing. These werewolves may have been born of dark magics, but otherwise, they're just people with altered DNA. These werewolves really should not be posing the threat to Superman that they are. Superman could stop this beast 1,000 different ways, even with the whole magic thing in the picture. But he can't do any of them, or else we have no story. But Superman is not a killer. He just doesn't have a problem with letting other people kill for him. Back with Batman, Demeter, and Janko, they're pissed at how they've lost Combs, who, as far as they know, was their only lead to get back to normal. Now we have Combs to study, to interrogate. Sometimes you have to let someone go just so you can learn more about them. I became the world's greatest detective by lighting my enemies on fire and then studying their charred corpses. I'm Batman. We jump back to Superman, who only now starts to rein in Man-Bat after he starts decapitating the werewolves. He takes a specially prepared vaccine to turn him back into Langstrom, while the narration informs us that Man-Bat is not a true creature of the night. He was not created by magical means. So I guess owls, coyotes, and moths are magical in nature? The transformation is near instantaneous, and yet Superman hears the bones breaking and reforming. The literally gut-wrenching sounds of Langstrom's internal organs rearranging. Langstrom, are you alright? My bones are breaking and reforming, you idiot! The narrator literally just said that! Do I sound alright to you? Superman says they need to hurry with giving the vampire boy his transfusion. Then we cut back to Demeter again, where he bumps into Batman in his apartment. He's surprised to see Batman standing in his apartment, but the narration points out that the only reason he didn't smell him before coming in was that the combined odors of his less-than-swanky apartment force him to not smell anything if he can help it. I'm honest to God surprised that the answer to why the vampire couldn't smell him wasn't, "Because I'm Batman." Batman asks Demeter what his dietary habits are like, and apparently all Demeter eats is stale roast beef, lager, and plasma that he steals from hospitals. Okay, that's all well and good, but isn't there an outbreak of vampires and werewolves that needs to be contained? Do you really need to keep tabs on someone who only wants to help you get this over with as much as you do? He gives Demeter the standard, "I'm gonna get you if you step out of line," that threat. Yeah, since he's done such a good job of stopping these monsters all by himself, then he leaves. The issue comes to an end as Demeter rings up a friend of his, who gladly offers an open vein to him. Oh no, someone who's totally fine with his affliction and who doesn't seem to be at all afflicted by vampirism herself as a result. This is a truly terrifying cliffhanger indeed. Issue 6 opens on Chad the boy vampire getting his transfusion, which doesn't seem to be an entirely pleasant process. He's fought alien invasions, superpowered enemies of the state, and even other heroes. But vampires and werewolves? Why, it's almost like comic books can be really, really silly sometimes. Superman is lamenting about how he should have been able to do more. Frankly, it's hard to disagree with that. And Batman comes out to ask him to step inside. Because Batman was there the whole time? Superman, could you step in? Congratulations, Superman, it's a boy! Actually, it turns out that Chad didn't make it through the transfusion. But then he wakes up, completely undead, and throws himself out the window without realizing that it's still broad daylight outside. Whoops. Such a waste. Tell me about it. This subplot with Chad has gone on for half the series now, and it goes absolutely nowhere. Superman, Batman, and Etrigan take Chad's body into Gotham Park to be used in some kind of a ritual to lure the remaining monsters out of hiding, thanks to some extra help from some of Professor Combs' notes that they found off-panel. Superman is apprehensive about using Chad like this. But the Man of Steel does it anyway. The world of magic is foreign to him, and he is out of his element. It's too bad that cell phones are foreign to him too, otherwise he could just call up one of the many magic users of the JLA and have them give him a hand. Then Demeter and Jenko show up again. They all stare awkwardly at each other for a moment. Then Etrigan begins the ritual. Then suddenly that monster that Superman was fighting earlier comes out of Chad. Jenko turns into his werewolf form and pounces on the monster, drawing out the other vampires and werewolves. Then another fight scene ensues where everyone is killing everything inside and... you know what? What is the point of any of this? There's no way for these poor people to be cured of their afflictions, so there's nothing that the heroes can do but kill everything around them for the sake of their own survival. So what's the point of even having the superheroes in the story in the first place? This isn't a superhero story. It's a zombie survival story. There is literally nothing in this story for Batman and Superman to do that couldn't be carried out by some random civilians. Batman can't use his scientific genius to stop the outbreak, and Superman's all but completely powerless. Why involve these characters when they're completely useless to the story? Etrigan casts a spell at the giant bug monster, making it implode with the spirits of everyone who's become a monster themselves. I really have no idea what this is all about, and I'm not sure I'm supposed to. Demeter and Jenko ask why they aren't returning to normal when Chad has returned to normal, despite being dead. Batman's theory? I don't know. Something about being pure of heart? This really makes no sense whatsoever. Superman flies off with Chad's body to give him a decent burial because he feels such a strong connection with this boy he only met an hour ago. Jenko is pissed and runs off to have sex with Kristen Stewart. Demeter disappears with a threatening promise that he will find a cure for his vampirism. I have no idea how you turn that into a threat, but whatever. We cut to a one-page epilogue where Combs is somehow alive and well in Arkham Asylum, and boy does he have plans. Then we finally end on another one-page epilogue showing Demeter rematerializing in his girlfriend's car, and of course Batman is able to follow him. Because it wouldn't be a Batman story without the Dark Knight doing something that's literally impossible, simply through the power of, I'm Batman. So that was Superman and Batman versus vampires and werewolves. And I don't think I've seen anything this long in which so little happened. Seriously, there is so little story in this that it could have been told in 2, maybe 3 issues tops. There was no reason to stretch it out into 6. The story was next to nothing, the villains' motivations were next to nothing, the impact that the main heroes had on the story was next to nothing, the contributions of the other heroes were next to nothing. There was no moral or overall point to anything that happened here. Normally, I'd save these treats for Halloween night, but I think I want to give them a little early this year.
Never seen a day break, leaning on my pillow in the morning. Lazy day in bed, music in my head, crazy music playing in the morning light. Oh, ho, ho, it's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so. It's magic, you know. Never believe it's not so.
So, I can fly fast enough to traverse the flow of time. What can you do? I can throw little metal bats at people. That's pretty sweet. Oh god, I'm useless!
Oh my god. Are you gonna keep that in?
I'll toss it into the bloopers or something at the end.
Subscribe, like, follow, comment, share, watch more.